Elliott. I am a holistic physical therapist. My office is over on at Still Point Wellness. They have a new side of offices, and I'm about to move finally into that space. I've been in the classroom area. And so there's a couple of somatic experiencing practitioners and coaches that are going to be in that little office area. So that's us. I'm the only one who's like pregnancy, postpartum specialist officially. So everyone else is just like people. And I'm so grateful that PEHN is meeting again in person. Oh, I feel like I've needed this for sure. Just being able to see people and like, did anyone change? Like I fell off the map because right at the beginning of the pandemic I had a baby. So it's been looking forward to this has been a healing moment for me. Like I'm back in and they're back here, like it exists, you know, the network, the web of all of us is so important for this community. Can we do just a little bit to look around the room and say therapist, hands up? Okay, can we do acupuncturists? Is there another PT? Oh, bummer. Is there an SE practitioner? Okay, Sarah. And then what else do we have? Massage therapists? And we have doulas. What? Only one doula? All right, doulas. If you're watching this video, welcome. I'm going to record this just of me, not of you all. Just so that on social media, if somebody wants to check it out, they can. They don't have to miss it. So thank you so much for being here. The topic that I wanted to share with you all about is full recovery when birth is traumatic. So a lot of my clients that see me as a patient have had a birth experience that was tricky in some way or another, and that's why they're coming in for PT, right? Some people don't need PT, although probably actually everyone does, technically, but they can live without it, or they're content without it. They don't like seek it out, but it is a great option for prevention, PT, physical therapy, pelvic floor physical therapy. It's a great tool for treatment and recovery postpartum. And then sometimes physical therapists show up in an emotional capacity or an energetic capacity. And so that's one of the ways that I might be a little bit different is I'm like, you know, if there's a person who's crying and they have trauma, I need to have tools to be able to show up for them. So I refer out to therapists. I make sure that they're doing like big work with those people if that's what happens. But it's so important to me. One time when I was early in my career, I got kind of stuck. Someone was crying and there was my finger right in the vagina, like, I don't know what to do. So I've spent, you know, a decade figuring out, even as a PT and not a therapist, how do I really hold space for the healing and transformation? Because we're not just our bodies, right? We're not just the muscles that we're trying to heal or that got torn or the fascia or the bones or whatever. We are like a whole nervous system and a whole person with all of our stories. And so I work on the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual levels. I'm sure a lot of you also do that. And the spiritual component for me, I access the Akashic Records. So if you've never heard of that, it is an energetic tool that helps me read kind of the energy field around someone, like what's stuck, where are they not flowing, what's their soul working on, what's the piece the puzzle piece that's missing that needs to pop in. So that's an intuitive process. I teach that to other people. And so it's a really powerful like energy medicine tool that I add to physical therapy, and I'm gonna just kind of say that up front and just know that that's a part of what I'm doing, but I'm gonna explain it in a different way. Well, when we talk about what does it look like, the full spectrum of recovering from a traumatic birth or a birth that happened to be traumatic, when there was trauma in a birth. And honestly, let's say trauma in pregnancy, let's say trauma in postpartum, because for me, the birth was fine, the breastfeeding was the trauma, you know, so it's like, and there was like a recovery from all of that. So let's say the perinatal experience, you know, is traumatic, and that doesn't necessarily mean depression, it just means like some things were overwhelming, or too much, or too hard, or can't manage while you're sleep deprived, right? You all get that. So that's who I am, that's where I work, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad to see like the variety of people here. And one thing, and I'm gonna go ahead and give you the clincher, and I'm gonna, right now, that's a pelvic floor pun if you didn't get it. The clincher is that the number one thing that I believe in my heart is the most important for recovering from a traumatic birth is the web. the network, the ability to have the person who is impacted ping on all the levels with the people that they find to support them, right? So not everyone's meant for me, not everyone's meant for you, you. It's all of us together. We make up the web that can help the person fully and totally come back to themselves, come back into their power, and come back to their center and find themselves, their body, like have the energy to exercise, have the energy to like engage in you know, movement and exercise. So that's the clincher, and I'll say it again at the end, but this to me feels like the honest answer to that question. How do you heal when birth is traumatic? Like, you find the web. So the better we are at knowing each other, the better we are at honoring our place in the web, the better the outcomes are for the people. Does that make sense? Like, X out all competition among the multiple therapists and whatever, like X all that out. It's this collaborative understanding that we each play a role. That I am like, when I was writing this, I didn't think that was gonna be what I came to, and I was like, oh yeah, it's actually PEHN in general. That's what is the most helpful healing thing for our people, our clients, and the people who are struggling. All right, so from a PT perspective, recovering when birth is traumatic is actually, the first step is prevention. So if you are starting to see a perinatal person early in their pregnancy, prevention, pelvic floor exercises, what can they do to feel their body, to notice their kegels, and to be able to find them, to really know what they are, because there's a lot you can't do if you can't even feel that, right? And so studies show that 45% of people do it incorrectly with just verbal cues. It's interesting, right? So we help, as PTs, help people feel, what are you doing, right? And so one thing I teach everyone is take your thumb, put it inside, hook it a little bit, and notice what happens. Does it go up and down in the elevator when you squeeze? Does it move? Does anything happen, right? So let's all just play with it, just a verbal cue. Let's do legs flat on the ground. Why not? All right. Get your sits bones all situated. And the first thing I want you to do is, whatever you've heard is a kegel, do that and see what it feels like. And now relax. Okay, and now I'm going to give you just the verbal cues I would give you as a PT for prevention, for like learning your body, okay? Now I want you to engage the pelvic floor muscles, okay? These are the muscles between your two sits bones, between your coccyx, your tailbone, and your pubic bone. They're mostly the muscles that surround the urethra, the vagina, the anus. And I want you to imagine that that is like a diamond underneath you. And what you're gonna do first is take your sits bones and bring them closer together. Careful not to squeeze your butt cheeks. Careful not to move your inner thighs. You're just focusing, you're not the only one. You're just focusing on the diamond, okay? The diamond of space between pubic, tailbone, sits bone, sits bone. Bring the sits bones together. Now bring the tailbone, tuck it under. Now bring the urethra muscle up and in. Now imagine your uterus is holding a tampon all the way up and in, and think up, up, up. Not butt cheeks, not inner thighs, not butt cheeks, not inner thighs. Hold it, and now relax it. Okay, was that a little bit different experience than what you had heard in the Kindle? Okay, so that would be a way that I would help someone find those pelvic floor muscles, right? Those are verbal cues. The finger's another story, but right, like there's a lot more to it than you might imagine. And taking the butt cheeks and the inner thighs out, that's a big deal, right? That's like finding your body. It's out of sight, it's out of mind, often, right? And so that's just one little piece. All right, another thing that PTs do is we help learn patients how to push. So if that was, helpful, imagine how helpful it would be to find your abdominal muscles and learn how to maybe do a diaphragm breath and relax those pelvic floor muscles. We didn't even do that. What would it feel like right now if you take those sits bones and you spread them out? And you take your tailbone and you lean it backwards. Can you feel the softening down a little bit? Sometimes I teach people by saying, ma versus shh. You feel it? Say shh, say that. Shh, shh, shh. There's a little lift usually, and then you can feel the difference in the relaxation. So just learning those little things are dramatic game changers for pushing, right? And clinical evidence shows that pregnant patients who are taught pelvic and respiratory diaphragm exercises by pelvic health specialists have more effective pushing than those who learn from written words alone. So there you go. And then let's talk about your abdominal muscles. So squeeze your abs. And now relax them. Okay, now, what I want you to do is pull your belly button towards your backbone. Anchor your ribs towards your pelvis. Bring your pubic bone up towards your sternum. And now engage as if I was going to punch you in the stomach and you were going to be ready for it. And now feel your abs. Now relax. Do you feel how just like a little bit of coaching and you're like, oh, that's my body. Oh, there's a lot more. Right? So those little coaching things are really a big deal. And properly performing Kegels during pregnancy reduces the risk of developing perinatal urinary incontinence and back pain. And I'm going to say it now, but it is so important to, in the postpartum period, be as comfortable as possible to navigate those changing hormones that lead to the perinatal mood disorders, right? So if you're in pain, that changes your risk of having perinatal mood issues if you're in pain. So being out of pain is a big deal, right? I'm going to say that in a minute. But, and then we talk about, as a PT, the alignment of your body, right? So if someone's pregnant, we're trying to prevent traumatic birth experiences as best we can. Then I work with the pelvis, and I work with the bones, and I work with the ligaments, and I work with the fascia. And you did not hear muscles on that list, because those, to me, are the lowest on the priority for the body, right? So can you live without an organ? Some of them, but not most of them. Can you live without blood vessels? Can you live without nerves? No. Can you live without muscles? If they tear, you're fine, you're alive. So your brain prioritizes these different parts of the body. And so for me, the bones, the ligaments, and the fascia are the most important parts that I'm going to treat, that I'm going to tune into, listen to, and work with. So the bones, you guys may know this and you may not, I'm not sure, but they hold our trauma. I just posted something on social media about what the bones release during fight or flight to help keep it going. Like calcitonin, I think is the word. So the bones play a role in our fight or flight nervous system, which I knew that from an energetic perspective, because what I feel when there's trauma is the bones, which normally have this gentle rhythm like this, bones are gently just kind of swaying the body. If you talk to a craniosacral therapist, they can confirm like that. This is kind of like, very gentle like that. So the bones are, they're holding the trauma, right? So if there's a bone in the body that's lost its nice swaying motion, and it's like, I can tell that there's a trauma that's got it kind of locked, maybe a shock, maybe a moment. So let's say a person is in their 30s, and how many accumulated traumas do you think someone in their 30s has had just from being alive, right? And so it doesn't matter that the birth hasn't happened yet, like what's stuck in there that's kind of, I'm nervous about this, or I had this ex who was horrible, or, there's all kinds of things that we just store in our bodies as a freeze, right? And so that's in the bone. So I talk to that and I say, how can you reclaim your space prior to giving birth, right? The next thing I do is I talk about the ligaments. And something interesting about the pelvis is that if you can get into a deep, deep squat all the way down, your pelvis opens up 40% more. And so when you're trying to give birth quickly and smoothly, if you have that full range of motion, you are much more likely to be able to get the baby to shift, move, and have the pelvis open up. So the pelvic bones open when someone is in labor and birth. The right side in particular moves a lot. It flares out. Sometimes it flares kind of forward like that. It's creating as much space kind of in the back as it can. The sacrum rolls forward, and all the ligaments that hold your pelvis in place for daily life when you're not giving birth are not letting you do that. They're in fact trying to keep your sacrum tucked under just a little bit more and your pelvis down and in, right? And so when I talk to the ligaments that stabilize the pelvis prior to giving birth, then that helps them do that natural process of opening. They kind of do like this. They kind of swing and they swing, and then they're open. That's part of like the contractions. The bones are also opening like that. So opening the ligaments, like the sacrotuberous ligament, the sacrospinous ligament in the undersides of the pelvis. If you all know that anatomy, it's like down under here. They're holding the sacrum down here and then out here. So those are really important for getting those to be open and moving. And then the fascia, right? So let's just do another little experiment here. If I ask you to feel in your body, what does scared feel like? Feel in your body. Okay, relax. Now feel what like proud of yourself feels like. What does pride feel like? Can you notice your breathing change? Can you notice your chest move just a little bit versus this? Or versus that your belly probably clenched and you're scared. You honestly, your muscles are pulling you into the fetal position, right? And so the fascia is what's kind of holding those neurological impulses, those signals, right? You probably have heard about fascia work, right? And so we posture based on sometimes these core beliefs that we have that are related to our traumas. I know I'm speaking to the choir when I'm talking to these therapists, but I then take it physically, because like once I know something like that, that's the magic of the therapy world, and I'm like, oh, my patients have this in their bodies. What do I do with their bodies? So we talk about the fascia, and then that's when I expect some tears, or I might expect some like light bulbs going off, because something that's been held for a while can sort of shift and let go, and it almost always is emotional. Keep the Kleenexes handy. So I'm working with the pelvis so that it's stable. Some people, their pelvises shift out of place and they're in pain. I'm working with some people to make it more mobile so that it can open up. But most importantly, I'm working to help it be symmetrical, right? So is one side elevated, is one side flared out? And that is because you have a soccer player and they did this, and then they get pregnant and they're like so tight right there that they can hardly get their pelvis to roll back, right? And so it doesn't matter what person they are. Everyone who's sitting cross-legged, all right, how long of a day do you sit cross-legged? Now get pregnant and you've got that fascial pattern, and now let's try to stretch the heck out of it, and you're already kind of shifted and twisted and, you know, in our way. So I do teach people sitting in neutral pelvis, like arch your back, flatten your back, and find the center location, or just do the other side. Release the last, right? Yeah. So that's some basics, you guys. That's like what I'm teaching my clients, and what all pelvic PTs are probably teaching them, although not all PTs are checking in on the trauma level or checking in on the emotional and fascial level. So it depends on the client you have as to which referral is best. So it's good to get to know us PTs. I sure hope my PT colleagues watch or show up or something to this, because we all play a different role. I don't have a gym, not an exercise specialist. So for like your runner type, who just want to like keep running, there's other PTs for them. You know what I mean? Like figuring out who you can refer to, and like they're going to be a good fit. That's what I wish for this network, to be like, I know that person, I think you go with them. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you all better, and us getting to know each other better, because I think that's the magic right there. We're gonna do another one, pelvic balancing. Take your fist, put it between your knees, and squeeze your knees together. And then take two hands if you don't have a drink in your hands, or put your drink between your legs and put your hands on the outside of your legs. And now push out. Push out, push out, push out. So this is not a motion you do regularly. Now do it again. Keep going, I'm gonna talk while you do it. 6 seconds, and then 6 seconds on the outside. What you're doing is you're asking the muscles to pull the bones when you're doing this. You're not asking the muscles to move a leg, right? You're not asking it to move this bone. You're asking it to move the pelvic bones. So we're squeezing, we're pushing out, we're squeezing, and we're asking that to balance out some of these pelvic structures. Does that make sense? So it's a simple treatment. Honestly, take that and run with it. You could tell anybody to do that little exercise. It can get rid of pubic pain in one day, if that's something that they're having. So just a simple little trick. And then I help the birthing person figure out what their inner yeses and inner nos are. Because before they give birth, they need to know themselves, right? Themselves. They need to understand if they have a no on giving birth, then that's going to affect if it's a traumatic experience or not. So I ask the question outright. So if you're not a therapist and you can ask that question, I would encourage you to do it. And if their answer makes them tear up, then send them to a great therapist prenatally, because that's a big deal, right? You want your body to do something really vulnerable, so you really have to know if there is a no inside of you before you do that. Does that make sense? So I try to help them create safety, to know themselves, to connect with themselves, so that they can have some sovereignty in that birth experience and be able to, sometimes I have them practice their yeses and their nos. Like if they're a survivor of sexual abuse or trauma or assault or something, I have them practice telling me, no, stop, back up. And that way, as I'm coming in to do a physical intervention, they get to experience what that feels like in their nervous system. To be like, don't touch me right now. And I feel like that's been a really helpful part to prevent some of the traumatic births that I've also treated. And then, so that's phase 1. Phase 2 is shit happens. I mean, birth happens, and you never know what you're gonna get. And the babies have a mind of their own, and everybody's doing their best, and doctors and nurses, midwives, have they slept? Has your doula slept? You know, like everything is a factor into how the birth actually goes. So we do our very best prevention, and then, you know, just hope for the best. And whatever happens is what happens, right? Yeah, we can do our very best. And so what I do then is wait for the postpartum person to get to a point where enough of the hormones have settled, enough of their body has like healed, they're not in active bleeding, right? And then I talk to them probably on email first, and I say, what can we do to break down some major barriers for your healing, right? Do they need meds? Do they have pain? Is it that? So major barriers. They have pain meds. Do they need another surgery? Like in the early days, if something's wrong, like call me. Like let's get you like talking to your doctor, being very clear. I help them say this is exactly what's going on. Help them figure out what it is so they can verbalize it to their doctors. Sometimes that's a big piece for people, is not knowing what's going on and not knowing how to say what is actually going on down there. Do they need a pessary because something's falling out, and it's temporary, right? That early postpartum period where everything just like got, you know, stretched and then smashed and then, you know, pulled, and then it might need some support in those early days. So is that what they need? But so I start with the referrals. Do you need a therapist? Do you need a somebody to listen to your birth story? Is that where we need to start? Right? We can't necessarily force someone to go down the path of healing their trauma if they're not ready, and they might need to start with just telling the story to somebody neutral who's just going to write it down for them, right? So start with that first layer of like get them the biggest resources they need, the big guns, if there's something you can kind of clear. So that's another reason why knowing my referral sources are so important. Acupuncture, like I'm stressed, I can't sleep even when I try. Like, okay, go see an acupuncturist. You know, like that's not me. And then I have them when they come to me, talk about the story that happened for them, right? And I listen. What words light up when they're talking? What's part of the story is like alive? That's where I want to ask another question about. Get a little curious, right? So even if you're a massage therapist or a doula or an acupuncturist and you're not a therapist, like these are just ways to really be fully present with your clients and notice things like that, like those little you know, incidentals. Like, okay, that is important. I can feel something change. Notice the tears, notice their body language, right? For me, I can shift with the energy, like if they go whoop and their energy goes all the way up, or if they stay grounded while they're telling a story. And noticing that is a really helpful piece for being like, okay, that's where we're gonna bring this into a full recovery, right? I don't want to put my hands on somebody whose energy is whoop and they're not there. That's gonna be hard on them. Or else I'm gonna do something very simple, like feet and help them ground, or pelvis and help them kind of just like reacclimate to their body. Something like just moving with the bones, like I was explaining earlier, right? So that's a piece, is making sure that I don't push. Whenever someone isn't ready, I'm not pushing for internal vaginal work, because that's what I do. I am waiting and making sure that they're not getting re-traumatized by my overzealousness, right? So yeah, one example is I had a patient who had an emergency hysterectomy right after her C-section. That was also an emergency. And I probably saw her like 6 months, and then 9 months, and then 12 months. Girl was not ready. I did not do very much at all. The scar was still very sensitive, and she would go away every single time, right? And that just takes time. And so when we talk about getting a full recovery, I'm also saying at their pace. I'm not saying instantaneous magic wand. I'm saying, what is their pace? So that's another piece of it. And then as far as the body goes, I do this really fun technique called osteopathic manual therapy. Have you heard of this? Osteopathic manual therapy, a little bit? Okay. It's really geeky in my left brain and really like gently intuitive with my right brain, so I get really jazzed by it. But what you do is, if you're a practitioner of this, you listen to the body. So it's like, where does my hand get drawn? Right? And I'm following the body. I'm asking the fascia or the organ or the blood vessel or the nerve. Is that what's having the most problem? And so that to me, and it has been for my recovery, one of the most powerful experiences is to be listened to on the deep level, on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a mental, maybe even a spiritual level if I'm opening Akashic records. Listening. Right? Y'all are doing that, I bet, too. And so I'm just continuing to emphasize how important that is. I feel like that's one of the biggest healing things, is to have someone who fully listens. Not so busy that we forget we just start diagnosing in our heads with I'm here with you. And so then, like I said, the body prioritizes those inner tissues that are more neurologically controlled, right? So the nerves, the arteries, the organs, and work with those. I had a patient who, she had a hemorrhage, a uterine hemorrhage, and it was really intense. There was a lot of sequelae that happened. She came to me finally for weird hormonal changes that and she had really bad abdominal pain that would come and go, and it did not seem related to food. And I kind of tuned in. I was like, I think this is related cyclically, both at your period and at ovulation, when you're changing and transitioning. And what I felt when I listened to her body is that her uterine artery was still clamped down as hard as it could, trying to stop the bleeding. It's like that was a moment of trauma, and nobody or nothing let her, you survived. Tell the body, you made it. You don't have to clench anymore. We're back to a normal flow. So sometimes that's what I'm doing, is I'm intervening and saying, it's over little artery, and I'm fascially just letting it soften. So the body gets the fascial message, the neurological message, it's complete, you made it. So for me, that was one of my favorite, most powerful moments where I was like, this is important. Her body did not get the message. When someone's pregnant, their liver gets displaced upward and it rotates. That affects the diaphragm, that affects breathing, that affects their shoulder range of motion. They're already compressed in like this, and now they're compressed here, and they start getting that mid-back pain, right? You guys know, you've heard of this mid-back pain postpartum. So I treat the liver, and the liver also changes the pressure that's in the abdomen. So when there's this much going up, it tightens up here and it loosens up here, so things can kind of fall down. So when the liver kind of gets back into its place, there's a little bit better pressure gradient, here, less negative pressure, a little bit more positive pressure down in the abdomen. Does that make sense? So the liver needs to get put back in place, and the body needs to be told, the pregnancy has completed. If someone has a C-section, their pelvis, which was doing this in labor, going in and out, and then there's a C-section, the pelvis is and they come to me, and it's been 3 months, and they're like, I can't feel my kegels, I feel something falling out, it's not heat, my body doesn't feel right. They didn't have a vaginal delivery, but they have pelvic floor issues. Their pelvis is stuck here. So I help their body realize that the birth is completed, right? And so bring it back, bring the person back to their belly, because that's often, that's not always, but can be a trauma. Sometimes they're grateful to be done, and they're just it's done. And they have this completion inside themselves. And that's not really usually my patients. Those aren't the ones who get traumatized by a C-section. It's the ones who are that's not what I wanted, or that's not what I planned, or that's not right. Something's not right, and they kind of freeze in that spot, right? So having the pelvis come back in and settle and realize that the birth has completed it. Neurologically, on a nervous system and a fascial level, that's really important. And then as I'm doing this talking with my patients, I also listen to the story, and find what was the moment where they disconnected from a sense of power and or control. And what I might do while I'm holding their body or their pelvis is ask them to feel that moment. Don't go away again, but feel that moment and just answer the question, what do you wish you could have said in that moment? And sometimes that is enough to, they're back online, right? So when it's more than that, I often will refer to a therapist. What I find, which is amazing, is that if someone has already done therapy, they've already worked on the story, and then they come to me and they're like, but I'm still not better, all I have to do is catch their body up to the mental and emotional work that they've done, and it's like, boom, we just catch them up. They're so close, but their body needs to really feel that they've done that work, right? And then without a therapist, then I need to ask more questions, and I need to refer out. So I'm so excited to again have this list and be like, I know who you should see for some really great perinatal support. And then holistic pelvic care. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. Erin practices that, and it's a modality developed by Tammy Lynn Kent, and it's holistic pelvic care. So she does very gentle internal lymphatic massage to the pelvic floor, really is what it is, with energy work that helps figure out where are your imbalances, the masculine, the feminine, the ovaries, the uterus, like what energy isn't flowing or what energy isn't balanced. And so at about the 9-month to 12-month mark, I would say it would really help someone to kind of feel that their center is back in place. Once they've been, cleared for everything, that's a great option. So I practice that, Erin practices that, there's a few other people in town. Oh, you do too? Yeah, okay, great. So that's a great modality. I have found it's so helpful. I had a patient who had a baby who was probably 5 now and was starting to get pregnant again. And my intuition was like, do you feel connected to the first child and that birth? And she was like, no, it's like really hard to feel connected to him. I tried and it's hard. And so we did a holistic pelvic care session and something that Tammy developed called Rebalance the Birth Field. So it basically helps connect the birthing person to the energy of birth, and this like the baby comes out and down, whether it was C-section or not, energetically. There's like this grounding that happens, like a release, and then it comes up to your heart, and then you reconnect to your pelvis, and it comes back to your heart, and you can use that birth energy, that birth field, to when your child is laying there getting ready for sleep, and you connect to that birth energy, it's soothing to them, to their nervous system. And so what her feedback to me was that was very helpful for her in feeling, she was like, I feel so much more connected to my kid after doing that work. So for me, holistic pelvic care has been a great resource that I do occasionally, depending on like where they are and when they're ready for that. But it's really good. Something else I wanted to say is that if someone is going to have a full recovery, I feel like we have to emphasize that it is on a physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional level, right? The physical part is a big piece of it, but there are so many components. So just checking in, whether it's your specialty or not. Are you doing okay here? Are you doing okay here? Do you feel like you've kind of got this rounded sense of like, okay, here's how I'm moving forward, and you've touched on all these pieces? Does that make sense? Full recovery. So let's talk about the recovery part. Women who have back pain are 3 times more likely to experience postpartum depression. That's fascinating. 3 times. That was the statistic I was looking for earlier, and I was like, oh, there it is. Pelvic PT can prevent pelvic floor injuries. About 1/3 of vaginal births result in some form of injury to the levator ani muscle, which is the muscle that lifts in the posterior part of the pelvis and pelvic floor. 1/3 of vaginal births experience some sort of injury to that muscle. So having PT prior to birth can reduce incidence of incontinence and prolapse. Having the ability to find it and treat that, and also cesarean birth as well can be improved by finding those pelvic floor muscles. So what I want to say is that for a full recovery, my experience is that people need to know that they deserve the option and the opportunity to reclaim themselves. And I don't know if you guys use that word very often. I use it gently, because I don't always love that word, but deserve is like you get to reinvest in yourself. Now you've birthed, and now you're a parent, right? And now you have to kind of re-emerge from the underworld, as you may say. Like, there's an aloneness to that in our current culture, and come back out into community and be your new person. So there is this reintegration into the network and into like their friend groups as a new person, that acceptance. So I always want to ask those questions too, right? So when they feel whole and proud of themselves, you guys can feel that posture, right? When you feel proud, your body, like, it flows, you know, things ping, you come back and you're like, I deserve to like have the support and be a part of the community and reclaim my vitality and my, you know, power. And so saying that word to them sometimes, oh, that helps the light bulbs go off. Like, you deserve to have the community and the support and come back, and you are honored for doing what you just did. It was a big deal, and the new person that you are is welcome, right? I feel like that is a very important thing. So for me, it sure was, and I think for my patients it is, and I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say. I encourage people for this full recovery exercise, Pilates, yoga, postpartum yoga. Someone from Roxy and Sue-Ann's group here, is Kim Dry, didn't come either. So she does West Asheville yoga, and they have a lot of postpartum yoga. So there are some great resources if you guys haven't heard about the prenatal and postnatal yoga classes. There are some great ones in this town. So I refer out for that. I make sure that they're getting their regular exercise. Pilates. Do we have any Pilates practitioners here? Come on, we gotta get them here for the next time. Pilates people. I do encourage postpartum doulas. Anybody postpartum doula? Yay, Sarah, somebody's postpartum doula. There are a bunch. There are a few in town. I hope they can come at a different time. So getting them the support that they need, like having someone just show up at your house and do things for you, like there's a relief in that. That is very healing. I had one lady, so this is not a pregnancy story, but this is a very clear example. She was in there, she was older, and I said, when did your urinary incontinence start? She said, about 3 months ago. And I said, was there anything else going on in your life whenever the urinary incontinence started? And she said, yeah, my husband died. It was the day after my husband died. So when I pictured that, all her support just like went away. And her body, which had been holding it together, couldn't do it anymore, right? So we have to listen to their stories, because our bodies reflect what happens to us, you know? Yeah, that was a great one, big one. So having someone show up and support you, and name that you deserve this level of support and care, that's a big deal. And then I encourage all of you know this, healing or healthy habits like healthy food. Are they taking friend time? Are they taking time for things that they love and enjoy, right? So I can do pelvic PT magic and strength and courage and whatever, but if they're not engaged with their life and they're just like overwhelmed, it doesn't stick. Does that make sense? It just doesn't stick. So I beat my head against a wall if I'm not saying this is more important than coming to your PT session. It's more important that you go do a friend thing. If this is your only free time, then go be with your friends, and then, you know, watch my videos or something from my online classes, and don't show up for this. You have to take care of those emotional needs so that you can be present for the physical stuff. And prenatal vitamins. I called the compounding pharmacy before today just so that I could say out loud, they have great prenatal vitamins that are nutraceutical level, so that instead of buying something from CVS, if somebody is depleted mentally and emotionally, they need more nutrients. And they're often eating crap because it's comforting. So tell your people to get really good vitamins. Got it? I want them to have like the basics, to be able to make the hormones that they need, to be able to make the neurotransmitters that they need to have a healthy brain, right? If they don't have nutritional support, then it's really hard for them to do basic functions, make milk, and that. So the compounding pharmacy has like heavy duty prenatal postpartum vitamins. And then my clincher, everybody, is that it is really about getting to know the people in this room and the people that aren't in this room that we all kind of represent and we know and we already refer to, and getting even more attuned to each other so that we can know that person. I can feel something like this person just came to my mind for you, and I think they're going to be able to really help you and support you and start sharing the love, right? I'm one piece of the puzzle for my clients, and being able to know you all is absolutely invaluable, because it just takes us all to be able to match and meet the different kinds of people that give birth and the experiences that they have. And that kind of leads to this idea, this abundance, like no competition. Like we all need to be referring to each other and getting our clients what they need. So sort of I'm holding that template for us all. You know, like if we're in private practice, I know there's a little bit of scarcity. There kind of is. You're like, this is my practice, right? So it's like letting all of us be in a practice together, even if we're not doing that, and so that we all feel the support of each other, and that is what we need to thrive. We need to thrive to have our patients thrive, right? So that to me is kind of the magic, and that I wanted to say. I call it feminine capitalism. It's like, here you go, system, we'll show you. We're all going to support each other. We're going to make sure everybody has their needs met, because when we're strong, we have more to offer them too, So I'm grateful for you all, for Asheville, for what we're making. Let's keep growing, PEHN. And what I'm offering is, if you are interested in like experiencing what I do and how I do it, I have a code. If you wanted to book a practitioner 30% off my services, I would be happy to meet you in that way and share with you what I do. And I don't just work with pelvises or pregnant people or postpartum people. I work with all people, because especially people who have given birth, that is the postpartum period, even if you're in your 50s and 60s, because it's like I was telling that person, it was 5 years later, and we did a meditate, or just like a guided thing for her to re-feel that birth energy, and it was really powerful for her. So it doesn't matter kind of where they are in the stage of postpartum or prenatal preparation, fertility stuff, like listening to the ovaries and listening to the fallopian tubes and getting those to loosen up so that the little eggs can float where they're supposed to go. That can be an important piece too. So it's not just like right around pregnant, right around postpartum. It's really the whole span, and working with like women, female people, and birthing bodies. So all of that. I do have some online resources that I offer a huge discount to Medicaid clients, no questions asked. It's called Save Your Vagina. And some of you may have had that class with me before, I don't know. Save Your Vagina, I did it for years in person, and I finally just put it online, and it's ready to roll. It's $88, 2 hours worth of pelvic PT information, all my good stuff. Lots of handouts, which I brought some handouts, and I'll lay them over there for you just to look at and see like what is she doing in this pelvic class. And then it's $22 for people who have Medicaid, no questions asked. So like if someone sneaks, fine, whatever. But I want that to be like available and accessible for those people who don't feel like they can afford to like go to multiple sessions and learn it. Like at least you're getting what I gave you, the difference in do a Kegel and like, okay, here's what a Kegel is, And I talk about the emotional pieces. So at least they're introduced to like, maybe I have an emotional component to my really tight, clenched, chronically clenched pelvic floor. So that's what's in that particular class. I have another class called Your Pussy Portal. It is all about self-vaginal massage. So how do you do it? What are the mechanics? What position do you put your body in? Can you do it in the toilet, in the shower, in the bed? And I have a map that you tear a hole in for like a vagina hole, and you can see when you put your finger in where you are inside the pelvis, what muscle you're on, how deep do you have to put your finger to really get somewhere. If I feel the hard thing, what is that? And I talk about that in the online class, and I have the map so people can really figure it out. So I feel like that's a pretty great resource. And in that class, I also talk about the emotions and your nervous system. Like, you have to be there, you have to be with yourself before the muscles will really change, right? Fascia rules muscles. So if your muscles are clenched, I wonder how tight your fascia is. And if and you can stretch with your own thumb into the fascia and relax, and you can get things to move on your own. So it's a great resource for people who maybe can't afford like one-on-one PT, or just want to do that practice. And it's sometimes hard to learn, you know, for your own self, how to do that. And then my next level class is called Your Enlightened Pelvis. And Sarah and I did that class a few months ago. Your Enlightened Pelvis. And so what I teach about in that class is sort of the energetics of the pelvis, right? So the uterine energy is more earth, the ovarian energy is more metal, and there's fire in the ovaries and then the water, and how we balance all of that out in ourselves, and how we work through trauma, and how we work through being able to harmonize with what's around us and be like, this is where I am in life. How do I harmonize with that, you know? And how do I just like kind of be with what is happening? And so taking that from kind of an intellectual place to a physical place, working with our ancestors to feel the support that we all need, right? If the support isn't there in person, sometimes just like inviting some ancestors to help you out, that feels good to the nervous system. So we work with that. So those classes are online, and they are resources for people that may or may not can afford in-person stuff, or just want to kind of go through a whole cycle and then come to an in-person session more ready and more prepared. So I offer all of that, and I'm going to spring back to prevention, and that is to say bracing. I didn't say that in the beginning, but helping the pregnant person figure out what helps them be able to keep moving. Right, so when debilitating pain keeps them from like taking their walks or doing their yoga, making sure that they have that support. Because again, it's mental health, right? Moving our bodies is a big part of our mental health. So, are there any questions? Thank you. Appreciate your attention and listening.